Hey, Real Green Ninja here. The video you're about to watch is a supplement to the existing tutorials and help videos already available on the Real Green website. I do take a more casual approach because I'm presenting this information as I would if you called in, although I may have a little fun with it. This video is based upon the information I, as a Real Green technician, would provide using my experience on the help desk. This video was created on my own time to assist with areas of the software that may be waiting for an official help video or tutorial. At the beginning of the training video, I will have the version of the Service Assistant the video was made with. I will also try to be as accurate as possible, but be aware, as Service Assistant updates are released, things may change. I'm using the name Real Green Ninja as not to stand out from the other amazing technicians that I work with. I hope the information in this video helps you, so grab a cup of coffee, and I hope you learn something new. Hey, Real Green Ninja here. Today we're talking about how to set up a service, so let's begin. Now, services can be one of many things. They could be around inside of a program, they could be a special job, they could be a repeating special, they could be a work order. Again, they could be a whole bunch of different things because services are pretty much the bread and butter. This is what you're providing on that particular visit out to that person's property. So we're going to go to Data, Product Parameters, Services, Program Specials. Now, when setting up services, you are going to have to give the service a type. And the reason why type becomes important is because, especially when we're talking about programs, you don't want to add two programs of the same type to the same customer. And in order to set rounds into a program, they have to be the same type as a program. So you'll see we have a couple different ones that are in there. Again, you may or may not have these, or you may have a lot more of them. But pretty much, if you want to create a new type, just click on New. If you can change this letter if you want to, as long as it's not one of the existing ones, go ahead and put the description in. And then if you want to put this service on credit hold based upon the customer's balance, then you can do it based on that way. If the customer's balance causes them going to credit hold, they'll go on credit hold. If you want to do it based upon how much the service balance, and again, this could be like maybe your services are $500 and their credit limit is $400. Again, it would be based upon the service balance. So like I was saying, you can choose which one you want to put on credit hold based on, but be careful if you do decide to put none, which means that you can be able to pull that service for the person regardless of whether or not they're on credit hold. All right. So again, you're going to select a type, and like I said, the reason why type is important is because you don't want to add two programs of the same type to the same customer. Let's say you have like a gold fertilization program, a platinum fertilization program, and an economy fertilization program. You're not going to add the gold and the economy or the platinum and the gold to the same customer on the same season or same service year, simply because you don't want to go out there and accidentally do round one twice. So again, that's where types become important. When you're ready to create your services, you're just going to click on the Service tab here, click on New. You're going to put in a service code. Now, you can decide what this service code is going to be. You can do with up to 3 characters. Now, be aware, though, I have seen a couple service codes that may be considered inappropriate by some people. I was working with one client, and they had 2 different spring aerations for whatever reason, and their accountant wanted to keep track of them separately. So they had the regular spring aeration, which was SA, and then they had a aeration spring special, and they decided to use the acronym. Now, unfortunately, aeration spring special, when you do the initials, it does kind of comes out inappropriate. So I kind of noted that to them, and it's one of those things they were just going through and adding a bunch of stuff they didn't realize. It happens, all right? And fortunately, they changed it up a little bit. They ended up calling it spring aeration special, which then became SAS. All right, so like I was saying, is you can put whatever you want, but just be aware that your customers could potentially see that if, for example, your technician left the technician portion of the invoice at the customer's job site. All right, so we're going to go ahead. I'm going to create a round, and I'm going to create the first round of a fertilization program. Now, again, you can do whatever you want for service code, but I'm going to just do F1 for FERT1. Okay, now I'm going to put in a description. All right, now this description is what shows up anywhere in Service Assistant when you're pulling up information, as well as this is what would show up on like a prepay letter or something that your customer would see. So again, keep that in mind. Now, you'll notice when I click off of FERT1, I click any field right here. If I click over here, you'll notice the invoice description will get copied with what was in the description. You can change that. The invoice description is just that. It's the description that the customer would see on an invoice. Keep in mind, prepay letters would see regular description. Invoices would be invoice description. So maybe my first round is a pre-emergent. So what I can do is I can come over here and I can call it pre-emergent. Okay, I think I spelled that right. If I didn't, oh well. I'm not a lawn care company. Oh, yep, it's your ENT. There we go. Okay, so again, like I was saying, you put the pre-emergent in there. And again, this is what your customer would see on the invoice. And, you can put other things. And, you can do something like this. First round. Okay, and again, like I said, do whatever you want. But like I said, I always tell people make sure to do previous invoices and everything looks the way they want it to. Now, this is where you're going to set the type. Now, again, because I'm setting up a round in a program, I'm going to go ahead and give it a type of L because this is a lawn care round. Obviously, if it was like a tree and shrub program, I'd give it type T. If it's a pest control round in a program, I'd give it type P, and so on and so forth. This alternate messages here, I will talk about that in a little bit because I got to finish putting this in here and save before I can show you that. But we'll come back to this. But pretty much this is where you can put in things like the French descriptions, Spanish descriptions, and stuff like that. Letter up here, I was told, when I first started working at Real Green, I was told that this is something that's not used anymore, so you can just disregard it. So I don't even know what the purpose of this is for. Start date. You can put a hard start date into a service. Now keep in mind though, when this service gets added to the customer, if it's a special job or if it's around a program or whatever, it's going to have that start date unless you check mark don't fill in schedule date. And you got to be a little bit careful sometimes because if you do put a hard date in there, like a hard start date in there, and you don't have that don't fill schedule check date unchecked, when you do your renewals, you'll want to make sure to come back here and change that start date to the next season. And the reason why is because I have had quite a few calls where the customer calls up, and again, you're my customers. A customer calls up and says, "Hey, I'm putting this job on the customer, and it's throwing in, January 15th, 2014." Well, it's because he had put that in, or someone at the office had put that in as a hard start date. So again, keep that in mind. You can put it in there if you want to, but pretty much this is saying we're not scheduling in any date before that date. All right. You also can decide whether or not the service is available for a particular branch or all branches. If you want to do a specific branch, you can hit the select, choose what branches to be part of, because some companies, they'll have their irrigation as a separate branch from their fertilization, as opposed to having two different physical location branches. All right. Down here, product usage. You can turn around and add what products are currently going to be used on this service. Now, it doesn't mean this is what you have to put in when you're posting production, but this is what's going to put in for you. So let's say we're going to go, and again, this is going to be first round pre-emergent. I think I saw there was a pre-emergent somewhere in my system. There it was. Okay, so we're going to put that in. Now, keep in mind, though, this is just test data and stuff like that. And also, I was told that some of the chemicals that are on that list are actually illegal to use now in the U.S. All right, now, as far as your product usage, you only have to put in the code or description. You don't have to do both, because as soon as we click off the field, it will fill in the other one for you. All right, so keep that in mind. Under rate, pretty much what rate's going to do is rate's going to multiply whatever number you put in here by the size number that's on the customer's job screen, and then put that as the amount on the production screen. So again, let's say this is a fertilization round. The customer has a 5,000 square foot yard. We put in a rate in of 10, maybe 10 ounces, 10 pounds, 10 whatever. And then what it's going to do is, under this amount field right here, it's going to throw in 50, because it's going to be 10 units here times 5, which was the size. Again, you can always change on the fly when you're posting production. If you use a little bit more, use a little less, you can change how much that is. Application method. This is how you applied the product. Again, you can create different application methods. Now, those application methods are going to be under data, product parameters, and I believe it's products. Yep, there it is. Application method is pretty much you're filling in what shows up in a drop-down field, and this happens just to be the drop-down field that it fills in. All right. If we scroll over a little bit, you'll see there's pretty much no other fields you have to worry about. If you want to delete a program or delete a product or change a product that's on a service, all you have to do is go back into the service, go into edit mode, select the one you want to change it to something else, or you can hit this red X, which will delete it from this grid. All right. Down here in taxes, any tax code that would apply to the service doesn't mean it's going to charge all the different tax codes that are on there, but any of them that could apply to the service, you're going to want to add it to this grid. Now, there is a convenient button called Add All, and it will add all the tax codes that are in your database. Again, tax codes are under data, company parameters. Not estimate forms. Oops, there we go. Company parameters, financial parameters, and then sales tax. So again, I usually have a ton of them because I have to add different tax codes for different situations, doing training and testing and stuff like that. Okay, so again, if you have a tax code you doesn't need on, let's say you have a city tax that applies to one, or you have a service that has a tax in one city but not in the other, you could hit all, select the one you want to remove, and then hit this red X here, yes, and you'll remove it from that tax code list. Okay, production entry. This is what you're allowed to enter into the production screen when you're posting production. It doesn't hurt anything to have these check marks, but if you don't want your employees to be able to enter that information, then you can uncheck it and they would not be able to enter the start time. Or we could uncheck this and they would not be able to change the price if the price needed to be changed. So again, keep that in mind. This is what you're allowed to enter for this particular service. All right. Over here in the invoice message, this is the invoice message that your client's going to see on their invoice. Be aware, if you want to, you could put out, today we applied such and such chemicals and stuff like that. But be aware it's going to print on every single invoice for this particular service. All right, even whether or not it's a program or around in a program or a special job or whatever. Down here under abbreviated message, you notice as soon as I clicked off the regular invoice message, it throws in whatever you had up there into the abbreviated message. You can put up to 3 services on the same invoice. That's called an associated invoice. If you have 2 or 3 services on the same invoice, it's going to use this message here, not this message here. Now, because of that, if you have a really long invoice message up here, you'll want to go through and double check to make sure it didn't get truncated or cut off, because you might have some important information at the end. If it's a case where it does get cut off, you may come over here, just tighten up the verbiage, maybe retype it, but like I said, tighten up the verbiage a little bit so that way the whole thing prints on there and it doesn't look like, or it's not like the ending of Sopranos where all of a sudden it goes to black, or everything just cuts off. All right. Under technician note, this is where you can go through and again put a note for your technician. Maybe this is the first round of the program, so you want to say hi to the customer. Okay. See, I almost spelled hi, H-I-G-H. I can never talk and type at the same time. Okay, so again, you put say hi to the customer. Again, it's going to print on every single invoice for this particular service. You must also have something in there. Remember to wear your personal protective equipment. And then, of course, on the invoice technician port where this message shows up, you can turn on driver's initial, which means the driver would have to initial it to indicate that he read that particular message. All right. Down here, general pricing and accounts. This is where you're going to tell the system how to treat this particular service. If this is going to be a round in a program, you would select it as a round cycle. All right, that would allow us to take a group of related services and put them into a program. If it's going to be a special job, then you check mark special. And you'll notice it opens up this field over here. And we'll talk about this field in a little bit. All right. If it's a work order service, you're going to select work order. Now, you notice when we select work order, that tax field up here disappears because work order is line item pricing. You're charging for time and materials, which means you're actually going in there, you're creating a product called labor and charging, $25 an hour, and then you're saying, okay, we're using, paver stones and this and that, and pretty much you're saying we use this amount, it costs us much money for that particular item, multiply it, and so on and so forth. I think I did a crash order on how to do work orders. But like I said, pretty much this is for line item jobs. Now again, because of that, the products themselves are what's taxed, and that's why that tax field disappears. If you want to set the service up as a service call, you can check mark it as a service call, as well as you can set it up as an estimate service. Now you'll see here, checking estimate service means this service is never to be charged and will not appear on invoices. Again, this is a service that is intended to go out and use for estimations. All right. Again, this is one of those features not a lot of people use, but if you need to, it's there. Okay, you could also tell the service to ignore credit hold. Again, you got to be careful because that means you will be able to pull the service regardless of whether or not the customer's on credit hold. If you do property valuations, like a mid-season property valuations, which a lot of customers do around this time of year, which is June-ish, okay, just to make sure, document how the lawn's reacting and stuff like that, they'll set up their property evaluation. Again, I did a crash course on how to do property evaluations. They'll set up their property evaluation to ignore credit hold. So even if they haven't done services in the last, couple rounds or whatever, they're still going to go with the property, take an evaluation, come back and say, well, why is the property not looking good? Oh, the person on credit hold, let's call up the customer and say, hey, you owe us some money. We haven't been able to go out and service your lawn until we can get the, this financial thing taken care of, and we just check out your lawn. Your lawn's kind of looking bad. So, let's get this taken care of so we can go out there and get your lawn looking the best we can. All right, pesticides you can indicate if pesticides are used in the service. Again, there are certain reports that you can run, especially if your state or a county or whatever requires you to indicate pesticides used. And you can also set up what are called pre-notifications. Now, again, pre-notifications are one of those things where unless you have to do it legally, most people don't because it's an added cost to business. An example of pre-notification is in New York, in the state of New York, they actually have to pre-notify adjacent properties. They don't even have to be customers of this company, but if the property is touching the property they're about to service, they have to send out some sort of notification. And in New York, I believe they are legally required to actually send out postcards. So you're talking, generating the postcards, gathering the information of who's the adjacent properties, and then having to pay for postage to mail them out and everything. So again, like I said, most people that aren't required to use them, don't. Okay. Now, also setting up a service. I'm going to go ahead. I'm going to set this up as a round cycle and special. I'll talk about that in a moment. But also setting up a service. If you do have estimate services in the system, you can then say that that estimate service is going to be for this particular service or program. And again, we have estimate services you can select on your job. This would be more for like a repeating special. If you have an estimate service where maybe you give free estimates for your interior pest control, you go out to the property, you go through, set up the estimate service of initial pest inspection or whatever, and make that as the estimate service. All right, initial service. When you set up a job that's like a repeating special, again, where you're going out there over and over again, and again, using that initial pest control, you might not do it as an estimate service. You might do that initial pest inspection as a initial service, and you'd go through and select that particular initial service. So let's take a look at it. Do I have any in there? I thought I had one in here. Maybe I don't. And what that means is when you do it as a repeating special, the very first visit, that very first line on that special job screen is going to be whatever service you select here. When you do your renewals, that first line is going to revert back to wherever it would have normally been. All right. Programs also have initial services as well. Under pricing, there are 5 different ways of pricing out a job. You can do what's called manual pricing, man-hour pricing, price table, estimated time of materials, or actual time of materials. Now, I did do a 5 ways of pricing in Real Green, or Service Assistant, so you may want to check that out. I'm just going to check the price table for right now, and I'll select the appropriate price table. Again, check out the video about how the 5 different ways of pricing in Real Green, and it talks about how to do all that. Now, you might have different pricing for different branches. Oops, I got to save it here. You might have different pricing for different branches. This is where you can say if it's this particular branch is going to use this table, this particular branch is going to use this table, because maybe one of your branches is in a more affluent neighborhood, one of them is not necessarily as affluent. Then again, like I said, you can set this up, and it makes it a little bit more dummy-proof about throwing it when you put it on the customer's job screen. Okay, so again, you can alter how to do pricing and stuff like that. Under accounts, this one you got to be a little careful with, simply because if you make a mistake, you could cause a lot of havoc. Pretty much what the accounts is you're telling the system which general ledger account do you want to hit when you post production for the service. All right, most of the time, if you do want to set it, you only want to change the standard one. Now, I do have, again, another video, because what's great now, I've made those videos. I can refer to them back here as opposed to saying there's a video I want to do. I do have a video that talks about how to do the general ledger accounts and how to map them out to different services and stuff like that. And it has some tips on what to do and what to look for. But again, the reason you want to be careful is I had a client that I talked to that had pulled a tax report. And their tax report was showing $10,000 more in taxes than they actually collected. And they were kind of freaking out about it, which is perfectly understandable. All right. Well, it turned out what they did is they'd gone through and mapped out, and they accidentally, and again, I never place blame, they accidentally tied the service to one of their tax codes, or one of their tax general ledger accounts. Okay, and because of that, everything that was done under this job was actually showing as being taxes collected. So their $10,000 worth of snow removal was showing as being $10,000 taxes collected. And so again, you got to be careful if you decide to do the accounts here and stuff like that. As far as prepaid discount surcharge, again, we really don't recommend playing around with those, or at least that's what I was told. I was told it would be nice if we could actually just hide those fields for whatever reason. At least some point, someone wanted that in there. If you do decide to play around with it, again, check it out. Do a detailed view of that general ledger on the test account and so on and so forth. All right. Now, over this yellow area, you'll see that we have non-service here. This is a special feature that they've added fairly recently, mainly for like pest control companies, because interior pest control companies could care less about what year it is. All they care is or what season it is. All they care is about what year of that program it is. So if they have like a 3-year pest maintenance program or something like that, they want to be able to actually set up the job over 3 years instead of having to set up 3 separate seasons. Okay. So again, they added this non-service here. I actually have a video. It was setting up a pest control or interior pest as a non-service year repeating special. Again, it goes in a little bit more detail about that, but I do plan to do a video specifically about non-service year eventually in the future. All right. Required information. This is what you are required to enter when you're when you're adding the job to a customer. So when I go to add a job to a customer, I would have to put in adult date sold if I activate it, put it in one of those 8, 9, or 9 green statuses. I'd have to put in the salesperson. I do not have to put in a source, but again, keep in mind, source helps keep track of advertising. If this is a job, especially if you're doing price charts, you want to make size a required field. So if the customer screen doesn't have a size for whatever reason, when you add the service to it, you'll be required to add the size, and then of course it would price off the price chart. Now what's cool is if you don't have a size on the customer screen, but you add the size to the job, it will prompt you, do you want to update the customer size to match the job size? And you can say yes or no. All right. Route, again, is what route it's on. Cancel date, cancel reason if you cancel it. Reject if they reject the estimate. As well as you can require the estimated buy as a required field. Again, this is when you're adding the job to the customer and putting it at whatever appropriate status. All right. Now, if this job is a repeating special and you do not want the next invoice on the list to be pulled unless the prior one's either been skipped out or completed, then you can check mark don't print invoice if previous is not done. If you're doing something like a lawn mowing or something, it's possible maybe you have really bad weather for a week. And the way you have your scheduling set up, you need to make sure to have all your schedule dates, or you're pulling by the exact schedule date for the week that you want to pull. So a lot of people will turn that off for things like lawn mowing and stuff like that. If it's a repeating special where you have to make sure you go there for 4 visits or whatever, then you'll turn it on because you want to make sure you go there for those 4 visits just in case you accidentally missed one. When you were pulling your work and stuff, you won't be, it kind of force you to pull that second or third one or whatever that you hadn't pulled yet before you can pull the third or fourth one. Automatic renew. That means it's going to be check marked again when you add the job screen to auto renew the customer or this job for the customer. If you have it set to auto renew, what's going to happen at the end of the year? You're going to go to process renewals. You're going to select the service or programs that you want to renew. If that checkbox is check marked and this service is marked auto renew is check marked on the customer, on the customer screen, it's set to auto renew, then it will be renewed with this particular batch. Again, if you forget to check mark this auto renew and you realize that we can override it, we can say ignore it or do whatever the default is if the default is set to auto renew. So again, keep in mind we do have ways of fixing things if you forget it. Auto renew date, again with the interior pest control, because of that non-service here and stuff, what it will do is it'll throw in an auto renew date for them. The auto renew date shows up. Let me just grab someone here at random. Oh, maybe not a marketing customer. Oh, those are all marketing customers. Why do I have? Okay, I guess. Oh, that's right. I did a video on marketing field or marketing import. Oh, there we go. Okay, so what's going to happen is when you have a job, you'll see this renew date here. When I go to do my renewals, I can go to Tools, Process Renewals. I can select the date range that date would be. All right. Now you can do it in manually if you want, but if you do it and if you tell the system to put it in there, what it's going to do, it's going to do 1 day less or 1 day before the first production date. All right. So if this was set up to put the auto renew date in there, all right, this one is in my system is not. But if it was set up to put the auto renew date in there, the first job I performed, it would then set that auto renew date. In this case, because the first one was done on 3/22, the auto renew date would be 3/21. When I'm doing renewals, and again in that case, if you do non-service year, eventually at some point you're going to do renewals each month. I would select the month of March, and I'd put that date range in there. And again, only the ones that have that date in there would renew. Okay, send confirmation letters. Again, this is one of those things just like the pre-notification. Unless you're legally required to do it, most people don't, unless you have a really picky customer base. But pretty much what that means is that you're setting this up when you add the job to the customer screen, that the confirmation letter checkbox will be checked. Actually, let me jump back here to this customer. I should just leave one of these customers open. All right. So again, let's say this has confirmation. So you'll see this confirmation is checked. When you generate that confirmation letter, which is located under Print, Letters, Confirmation Letters, when you print that letter, this checkbox will uncheck itself. And that's how the system knows that person has gotten their confirmation letter. Or at least the system has generated it. Who knows? Maybe you didn't quite make it to the mail post office or whatever. But again, it means the system generated that letter. Again, if it's unchecked. But like I said, it's an extra cost of business because you got to pay for the letters and postage and all that stuff. Most people, unless they legally have to, they don't. Available on the internet. If you have CAW, then you can make sure, check it if the customer can sign up for this particular service on the internet. Lock sold and cancel dates. This allows you to lock the sold and cancel dates on the particular job, and that way your employees won't be able to alter it. Lock schedule default. This right here is your scheduling criteria for something like a repeating special. By default, it's set to none. Having all these unchecked is the same as having all these checked. If this was something like a repeating special, we'd set up a schedule based on how often we want to repeat. So if it's like a, let's say a quarterly special or something like that, we'd go here and put in 90 days. And we'd say, we'd pick at least one of these check boxes, so at least this puts a schedule date. And of course, keep in mind, this is just the defaults when we add to the job to the customer screen. We can always change it for the customer by customer basis. You can also do it by week. You can do it by 2 times a month. Select how often per month. You can select, for months, whatever, as well as years and stuff. As again, I always tell people, play around with it with test customers if you decide to play around with things like the year and month and stuff like that, just to make sure it works and behaves the way you want it to. But like I said, for the most part, if it's a fertilization round or a one-shot, then you're going to just set it up as none, and you can leave that all unchecked there. Now, I just mentioned one-shot, and again, I'm going to backtrack to here. If you have a service that's going to be inside of a program, but you also want to make it available as a one-off or a one-shot, which means that they can get the fertilization round 1 pre-emergent without having to sign up for the whole program, then you'd have round cycle and special job checked. If it's only a special job, you'd uncheck the round cycle. If it's only a round, you check mark only the round. So again, that's what's cool about the software is you can make a mix and match like that. You don't have to create like 50 different services for one service because of the different scenarios and stuff like that. Down here, core and additional. Now, when I was first started working here, I asked what's the difference between core and additional, or what uses it. I was informed that one of the large companies, one of our large franchise companies, actually wanted the ability to distinguish between a core service and additional service. I have literally seen only one report that even asked for whether or not you want to filter by core or additional. So for pretty much 99.999999999% of the people out there, you're only going to set it to core because everything is pretty much a core service. All right. Default billing type. This is what you normally would bill it as. Okay. You can set it for regular invoice, installment statement, credit card, or ACH. But please do not set it for installment, credit card, or ACH simply because those are usually set up that way based on a customer by customer basis. Normally what you're going to do is either do regular invoice, which means you're going to leave something on the job site at the time of visit, or statement only, which means that you're not planning to leave something on the job site, and then you're going to bill them either monthly, bi-monthly, quarterly, or whatever. All right. So again, for example, lawn mowing, like a weekly mowing or whatever. Normally, when your mow crew gets out there, they're not going to leave an invoice every time they go out there and mow lawn. What they're going to do is they're going to go out there, do the services and stuff, and then when you come back to the office once a month, you're going to do what's called a monthly invoice, which will take all those services that are set to statement only that haven't had an invoice printed yet and put it on that monthly invoice, and then you mail it out to the customer or drop it off the customer's location. So again, depending on what it is, regular invoice or statement only, you got to be careful because if you set it to installment and you forget to set up installment plan for that customer, and this job is set to installment type, they'll never get charged. Again, take a look at how installments are set up and stuff like that. Credit card, if your customer is set up for auto pay and they said originally, hey, I know my fertilization or whatever set for auto pay, but could you go ahead and just bill me as for this one? If you had to set the credit card and forgot to change it to regular invoice or whatever, then that person's credit card would be changed. It might get a little upset. ACH, automated clearinghouse, pretty much is electronic check. So like I said, pretty much you're going to do regular invoice or statement only. All right. Now up here, max. This is max per year. This is how many times you think you're going to do it. Again, as is special job. Because like I said, if you uncheck special, that box disappears. So all this yellow area is only in regards to whether or not it's a special. All right, let's go back to regular invoice. There we go. Max per year is how many times you plan to go out there. If it's something like a lawn mowing or an interior pest control you're setting up as a repeating special, this is the maximum amount you plan to do for this particular customer. So again, for like a 3-year, once a month interior pest management type of thing, that might be 36 repetitions. For a lawn mowing, that might be, maybe 30 or 40 lawn mowings, depending again how you're, or not 30, 40, it might be like 60, 90, depending on how many, I'm not 60, 90, well, maybe 30 to 40, depending on how many times you plan to go out to that person's property. My math is, it's a little early in the morning. Actually, it's 12:40 or 34, but I had a late night. Went to the gym, did some working out. Yeah. Try to get in some shape. All right, so again, as I was saying, max per year is how many times you plan to go out at most to this. Now, once the number of services performed hits that max per year, the job will mark itself as completed. So if this is for like an aeration, which you only plan to go out once, you'll put in number 1 there. If it's a lawn mowing where you plan to go out multiple times, you got to figure out how many times is the maximum amount of time you plan to go out, and then you can set that. And then you can also go through and change it again on the customer's job screen itself. Type. Because this is a special job, we're going to mark it as a special job. So you'll notice when it's a round in a program, it's going to be as type L. When it's a special job, because keep in mind special job is what opens this yellow area, it's going to be S for special jobs. Minimum for full. If this is a repeating special, And again, maybe you're doing a 3-year long or a 3-year interior pest, but they have to have at least 20 visits for it to be considered a full service. You're going to go through and put in the number of minimum to be considered full. So again, most people, don't worry about it too much as far as repeating specials are concerned. This is more for like lawn care programs, fertilization programs, whether or not it's a full versus a partial. All right. Down here, units. This is units of measure. If you have your system set up to do price charts, okay, for this service, under my pricing, I have price charts and stuff like that. This right here is telling which unit of measure that's on the customer screen to use. Now keep in mind, most people have the main customer screen, that very first screen that you're looking at, they have that as their serviceable property area for their lawn. But under the property tab, you can add other property inventory items. You can add like the perimeter of the house. You can add things like different sections. Maybe you have different types of grass in the front versus the back. You can go through and select what kind of item they have on their property, and once you have it set up here, you can turn around and say, use that unit of measure for pricing. So again, if you do like flower bed maintenance, well, you're not going to do it off the size of the lawn, but you might create a unit of measure, and that unit of measure would be created under property, product parameters. You create your unit of measure here, which defines like 1,000 square feet, flower bed 1,000 square feet, perimeter linear feet, and stuff like that. And once you've created that, you'd create your property inventory item, which would be, the perimeter of the house, backyard, zoysia, or whatever. And once you've done all that, then you can go through and tell the system to use that flower bed 1,000 square feet. And if the customer has that size, it will use that number instead of the one on the main customer screen. Okay, so pretty much, and again, I'm just going to do 1,000 square feet for right now. So pretty much that's how you can set this particular job up as a round cycle, a rounded program, as well as a special job. Now, as I mentioned before, let's go back here to this alternate message. When you click on this button, it's going to open up this screen, and again, you can have different messages for different companies and branches. Now, this screen will override this screen. So be aware of that. So if you come up here and say, hey, my message is not the same as what's in here, then it's possible someone set a message up in here. And you'll see we have the English, the French, and the Spanish descriptions, and so on and so forth. And pretty much these fields match. Description is going to be description, invoice message, and technician note, and so on and so forth. So, all right. So like I was saying, that's pretty much a round, or how to set up a service. As I mentioned before, there's different situations. If it's just a round in a program, you just have round cycle. If it's just a special job, you just have special check. You can do a round cycle and special job, so you offer as a one shot. If it's a line item pricing, you do as a work order. 99% of the people do not want to set their rounds up in their programs as work orders. So if you do, it's probably just going to be like a straight special job. Service call, again, that's where you're planning to visit as a follow-up or whatever. Estimate service, like I mentioned before, is that this service here is going to be used to estimate another service or program. So I hope all this helps, and you guys have yourself a wonderful day.